around the island. There's one I just noticed the other day leading from the prison yard down to what they call the prisoner gardens on the San Francisco facing side of the island. Which is like, yeah, it's all the way on the other side, but got most of the staircases in from what I could see. Like, I'm trying to get as much of, Alcatraz's detail in as I can. Oh yeah, I think there's on that slope that you're going around, there's one going down towards the parade ground. Not quite sure if it's a stairway or a store or like some kind of storm drain kind of thing, a ditch. I need to get more photos on that. Because I can't really tell what it is from Google Earth. I can't really find. Yeah, I know, but it looks like it's a stairway, but it could also be like sort of like a storm drain to channel water down to the lower level. But I want to get that in there because it's like yet another path players could take to run up to that upper area right there from the what is that, like the west side of the island, I believe. And then there's more stairways connecting the new industry building to the equipment shed on the prisoner garden side. And yeah, it's just, I'm starting to work in all the smaller stuff now just to get it looking a lot better.
Cool. What do you think was the most challenging this week for you
But
in terms of basically getting situated modeling wise?
Definitely the water tower. The water tower took a few attempts because like modeling out the beams, like what I pretty much ended up doing is I tried to do the beams all in one shot, like all together. But what I ended up doing finally was just kind of doing one of the supports and then copying it around to the rest of them. And doing the crossbars was a little tough because I had to line them up to the supports and then kind of make it look connected the way it does in real life. And then after that, it was really the railing at the top that I had a hard time with because of the way it looks. So I'm not too familiar with Blender's tools still, even though I've been using it a long time. Like, I didn't want to model it all in one piece. Like, the bars were easy to do, but then there's like the crossbars that are connecting and creating like a little like guard rail. I tried it by doing one and then copying that all the way around, but it didn't line up right, like the way I was doing it. Let me try it a different way. Tried it with like a whole piece, but the extrude tools weren't working or they weren't producing the desired look. So it took a few attempts before I finally got it to a point where I was like, okay, this is working. I like the way this came out. It looks pretty close to the original or the real thing. I'm done. I mean, I think I spent like an hour on that stupid railing alone because I modeled it out completely like maybe 3 or 4 times. And it wasn't until the 4th time where I actually was satisfied with the way it looked. I was like, okay, that looks closer to the real thing. So I'm done here. That's it. I mean, eventually I just ended up modeling one section and then very carefully copying it and then rotating it into the next segment and then so on and so forth. Because when I was doing it the automated way, it was just coming out crappy. It was clipping. It was coming out offset, like it just wasn't aligning it between the posts the way it was supposed to look. And then as opposed to the railing on the guard tower, that was super freaking easy. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. Oh, that was probably like the easiest thing. I mean, even the crow's nest on the guard tower was pretty damn easy. I took a little extra time to model an interior for that. I mean, I don't know if we're going to make that accessible.
The idea
I might
is
even
that
have to model out that
the only
trapdoor
time,
if
the
I
only
decide
side,
to do that.
the only thing that's going to be accessible from the interior is pretty much the main prison itself, and everything else is just surface level, just being able to walk by it and look at it, kind of deal. Like when it comes to like further than that, it'd be up to the discretion of like when me and Chris get together later in the year to like the actual campaign stuff, and it'd come down to the requirements of like the cutscenes and stuff like that, because like. Yeah, so it's one of those things where like we don't want to get too much into it based off of just like stuff that me and Chris have talked about that's more of like speculative for the future. But yeah, no. The only thing right now for us as a priority is just getting the outside exterior areas all situated and done. and then getting to the point where we can focus all of our efforts on the actual interior and getting that to where it's the main hub point for like people to kind of kick off their missions and their like what they're playing at any given time.
Yeah, also like once I start getting all the textures in there, I'm gonna have to add doors.
Oh yeah, the small little detail
to the
stuff.
doors.
No, there
'Cause
are.
I don't think I added
haven't seen any
any
because like you
doorknobs
figure
to
like
any
there's
of the
not even a
buildings yet.
doorknob on here, and like you don't even think about it until you mention it just now, where it's like, why are there no doorknobs on these? And it's like those little small details that you never think of when you're drawing the block out because you're thinking of broad strokes. You're thinking of establishing, the canvas or the general design, the block out, and like that doesn't really even come when you do the detail pass. That comes when you do the detail pass. When you're just like, okay, let's take all of these like small details and let's incorporate them into like the doors and the little the architecture here and there where it's like you go to like, let me see if I can find one. Like this one doesn't even have a door. Or like this one does, ironically. So you put one on here. So it's like it's kind of random because you kind of jump back and forth, I can see. But it's one of those things where it's like that's not even really.
Well, that one has one because I think it's like I was doing some like pre-made doorknobs and I wanted to test to see how it looked or how it fit in. So yeah, I think that's
No,
one
I
of the
dig
ones
it.
I
I dig
actually
it.
added.
But
it
it's just one
onto.
of those things where it's just kind of like it's not really even a priority into the point where you're ready to essentially, what am I trying to say? Like when you're ready to basically like do the detail pass and get it to a point where like you want to get it like done, like you're gonna right before you start texturing, kind of deal. So it's like it's kind of trivial anyway at this point where we're just kind of going for like the broad strokes of the island, and then you go back and you do that anyway when you make like your modular door handle that you use everywhere. You make like 2 or 3 or 4 base ones, and then you have like a atlas or some other thing to kind of give more variation and textures, or you.
Yeah, they're modeled.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
you forgot to
need
mention
put
you
them
also
on,
did the
that's it.
bookstore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the bookstore, pretty straightforward. I mean, I was gonna do that as a one-off along with the ranger station, but I figured like, I'll do it separately. I'll keep it separate because it's got different architecture to it. It's not as simple as the ranger station looks, even though it's attached. So I kind of wanted to do it separately, also because it's got those like overhangs in it, like these little areas that you could go into that are also pretty much, I
Yes.
guess, function as storage areas. And I mean, it's smaller too, so like I try to like break these up into pieces so they're not like these gigantic meshes that
No, I dig it.
cause issues in the future. On top of that, there's like a lot of
That just
collision
comes
work
last
I
on
need to
before
do
we
as
get ready
well.
for playtesting.
I think
Because you figure right now, yeah.
like most of the stuff, like the walkways, like that walkway on the ranger station, I did do collisions for that. Ranger station should have collisions, but I think after that I stopped doing the collisions for the buildings because I wanted to move it along a lot faster. And collisions are pretty easy to do. I mean, it's just primitives and then lining them up with areas where you want units to like kind of bump into rather than just walk through. So it's pretty easy to do, even though it's going to be time consuming given the number of
Yes.
buildings and detail that I have. I mean, because even for like the destroyed buildings, like the warden's house and the officers club, I want to make it so that they can shoot through the windows. I don't want bullets hitting those empty spaces. I actually want them to be able to go through there. So I want to do stuff like that so that it's pretty accurate. I know that that's probably not what we were intending to do, but I kind of want to have that in there so that like when it's being used as an RTS map and you have units in these areas or there's infected coming through there, you could still pretty much shoot through these gaps.
Yeah. Good positioning, basically. Because the idea is that this is just the main menu version. And like after we do this, you're gonna go back and you're gonna play like you're just end up deleting like 70%, 60% of the miscellaneous clutter. So people like even to remove the crane, even where it's like, yeah, you would use that for the version that the players can go on and build, and there's no resources here, but it's kind of meant as like a laugh refuge, like a staging area, like kind of like an area to hide in and suck your thumb, or maybe just to like store auxiliary units on, kind of deal. Where it's like, yeah, so it's going to be really interesting when we get to that point, because that's also when we transition over to porting over San Francisco North. And that's going to be like after we get to the point where we're happy with this map. It's fully textured, it's fully modeled, and And you're able to walk around, not have to worry about falling through stuff or whatever. So it's gonna be fun. But you figure that is be coming as we go over the next coming weeks. Yeah.
I will say though, you've
Oh,
got the money
yeah, it's a nice shot.
right? that shot looks absolutely amazing because of the fact that all the time and effort that Efron's put in, right, just makes it's genuinely.
Yeah, it's
I
nice.
can
I mean, you
hardly
figure
think of the words. It really does.
Yeah.
It looks like it's been modeled by a team, but no,
Yeah.
it's just Efron, and he's
Mhm.
done a fucking job. That
It's like I said last week. I was like, when he first told me, "Oh, you're gonna do
Yeah.
Alcatraz,"
Where's my alcohol?
like, how am I gonna do all of this shit
So it's
by
one of those things
myself?
where it's like, but you've done a really good job. You've managed it, and you figure the sooner I'm kind of waiting, counting the days until I can move Dimitri over to help you, because he's been kind of working on the backlog of getting the turrets, and we're gonna segue into that real fast. So we showed it off last week, which was the turrets. And let me just remind people for that weren't here last week is Dimitri basically came up with a modular platform for a turret system. And the idea is like the SAM and the MG turret and the anti-armored like cannon are basically on that platform. And the idea is that we want to use that base foundation to be able to do future variations of turrets or fixed platforms that you can build on for your bases, for your defenses. And we got the center one operational, so I was going to show that in the test map that we have. But let me see. I need to actually really quickly update our SDK because we had a couple of last minute bugs that came in. Okay, I guess I already have the latest version. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the SDK again. And let me show you guys the turret. So the MG turret is undergoing some last minute augmentations, so it's not ready to be shown today. But I'm going to be showing the cannon version that essentially Derek's been working on prototyping. We showed it off very loosely in the development channel on Discord. And if I press the equal thing, you'll basically see that the cannon will track and shoot. If I spawn a crap ton of spitters in, it does AoE. It's like those spitters just ganked that guy. Let me just spawn in a metric crap ton. This is kind of like our you're not going to move, you're going to die test map for just making sure that the targeting AI and everything else is functional. And then you can also see that if I spawn in the multiplayer, because one of the big things this week was setting the foundation of how turrets are going to work, and that took a little bit longer than we'd like, but it was about basically making sure that we were hitting all of the right marks in terms of basically like we want a turret system that is easily extendable, and we can add more variations in the future for like other factions or just generally for Cirque as well. So the idea is, let's see if it's going to work properly. So it is shooting, but it's not rotating properly, so that's kawaii. I guess there's something going on there now, so we'll have to look into that. But the idea is that what it does, it is shoot. I have to look into that. Yeah, it's just not rotating. All right, well, that's fun. I guess that got broken. But the idea is that it is working in terms of basically single player, and we need to kind of go through and figure out whatever's going on with the turret rotation issue for multiplayer. So that's one of the things that'll bleed into next week is getting that ironing out and working. Let me see if I can zoop over to the large RTS test map, spawn in. And then I'm going to, let me turn off the second client because last week we got a lot of lag and I just want to show just generally where we are in terms of progress. So ignore these little dev boxes. I was prototyping so much stuff this week for R&D, and I'll go into that in a second. This might not work. It might, but let's see if it's going to work. No, it's not going to work. He never committed in time. Yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah, the welding and the other stuff isn't working, and they're acting funny. So, yeah, that's fun. But basically, there's like a bug right now that we were fixing right before the podcast, which is why we started a couple of minutes later. That basically, like the welding animations and some of the other stuff aren't playing because some assets weren't set correctly on the new turret. But the idea is that you figure like we did get it buildable, and we're just kind of working on the foundation and getting it all situated. And then the other thing that we were working on this week was, you can also see that's an issue, is that they're going to have to remove the collision from movement on the cannon, because that's going to inhibit the ability for units to move. And if it doesn't affect the navigation mesh, then you get stuff like this, where like there's a desynchronization of like the navigation is only that little green box, but there's a collision here, and you can't do that. You can't have it to where when a turret rotates, it's constantly updating the navigation and bottoming out people's CPUs and updates. It's not worth the time and the effort in terms of basically like the amount of resources that you're going to put on people's computers just shooting a gun. So it's one of the things where we're going to have to make the technical cut there to have the collision stop somewhere around here. So then that way units can't get clipped and hit around and physics banged around by the turret. And that's one of the concessions that you kind of have to make when you go the more realistic route of not having smaller self-contained platforms where the barrels don't extend out as far, is that you have to make those concessions in quality of like the collision, so you don't run into this where there's a you know an issue here. But the other thing I was going to show was we got the new base preset system in, and we got some preliminary weapons in that are basically forming the basis of like getting, like I mentioned previously, we were working to get the mock-up and all of the core systems situated here. So then that way we could just make sure that like, okay, like we're happy with everything. We got the weapon presets in, the primaries, the secondaries, we brought over 1 or 2 test weapons. We got them in. We're refining, we're bug fixing, you know, we're testing things. We're making sure that the naming is working for like Bob Carlson, you know, and then like all that kind of stuff. All that's situated and working. There is a bug that would appear. Let me see if it's going to do it. No, it didn't do it that time. But basically, so the presets are working, but there's a couple of like user interaction UX things that we need to improve, where it's like you don't know that you've like selected a preset. Like it's weird because like it just changes over here, but the color should change of the text. Like there should be some kind of visual indicator that you've selected. So it's like little small things that we have to kind of go through and do. And I don't think the delete preset's working right now. Yeah, it's not. So it's like we need to kind of go through, and we got the fun of like I guess you could say the skeleton working. And we're just kind of working to go back and just kind of ratchet these things up and just make sure they're fully working and firing on all calibers. Yeah, and then I can basically just build and it does that. And we got the groups working. Last week it wasn't functioning for some reason. So we got that situated, and now they recruit into the groups. They show up on the bottom left. All that's working. And when they come in a second, I will show that. And then we'll move on to the next thing we have to show for programming. And I'll talk about, since we're on this map, I'll show you some of the things that I've been prototyping and R&Ding to try and fix some outstanding issues, long-standing issues, whatever you want to call them, in terms of how some of the systems function in the vanilla version of the game. So here they come.
I will say something I'm pretty excited about personally.
Yeah, I mean it's the
logo.
same thing we had before. It just looks a little more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
it looks way more.
So
pleasing, yeah.
you'll see that the groups are being populated down here for 2, and then let me see if I recruit into 1. I'm just curious.
That way I can give all of my machine gunners right
Indeed.
off the bat. All the
could.
most powerful machine guns.
And then I
Because I'm
I
a
believe you.
machine
I've
gun
seen you
spam.
play the game.
Yes, I overwhelm the enemy
Yeah, you
with
do.
machine guns, yes.
Yeah, you are.
I'm an asshole.
Let's see. Oh, I should have turned off that debug logs. I apologize for the visual clutter. I was prototyping some stuff, and these are all just debug strings. Can I mitigate that? I can mitigate that. It doesn't really help that much. Let me add some money so I can show One of the other things we got is that we made it to where the gates were properly being upgradable. For whatever reason, there was a bug where the gates wouldn't always be upgradable from a wall. So you would have it to where, let me build an engineer. I need another bloody engineer so I can show this. There was a bug where basically like you couldn't upgrade the long-standing walls into the gates properly. So I went through and basically rectified that and got that working with Derek. And now when you select walls, if they're the proper size, you can upgrade them. So I can click this wall that was just built, switch it to a tier 1. And because my engineer is in such close proximity, it's going to auto open because gates auto default to auto opening mode. Did I get my engineer? We definitely have to get the little class icons that appear very soon, and then get the bloody the building lights on, because you can see just how hard it is to see at times. But what I was going to show, like I was showing Chris earlier before we came, was just generally a quick little example of me just building a base with the newer system. And then the turrets. Add myself some more money. And just kind of showing like what we have so far in terms of the total like setup. Because like it's very rare that not everyone comes to every single podcast. So I just wanted to show like what we have in terms of like what we have previously, and just show like an actual base being built, kind of say. Because this is a very crude example of like an outpost that you'd build in the game, maybe in the middle of a city. And then maybe you just drop in units every once in a while, and you just kind of use it to like pester an AI that's been bugging you. Obviously, you'd probably have a little bit bigger and have like a barracks probably inside the perimeter. But this is kind of like what we have in terms of like a quick little mock-up of just making sure that everything's working and we're testing all the systems. So you have your spotlight. There's no emissives yet on these. We're going to be doing that in the next couple of weeks when things calm down a little bit more. It's like icing on the cake. But you can see like the guard tower now works. Last week this wasn't working. Now it's working. Where I can give him the M107, and then I can zoom in on him, and he has the gun. And he's ready to wreck face, you figure. And then if I click on him again, I can switch him to the M249, and that works. And then he has that gun. So, you know, we just kind of went through and we've been kind of ratcheting up and just fixing some of the bugs that we had last week. It is really dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to really quickly just kind of show you what I've been prototyping over the week from my stuff. Is that these zones, these boxes, are meant to represent the zones that we have in the game, and marking civilian evacuation zones, and also marking power zones. Because one of the big things that we got over the years is being able to build on structures, is we needed a way to be able to reliably detect if you're building on a structure in the future, because not now you can't do it, but one of the major design goals of doing, when we go back and we implement pandemic and everything else, is making it to where you can build on the rooftops and making it to where the AI can climb and everything else. And you can see we had like a quick little crude example of how the AI know how to get up and down this via a nav link. And we're going to be using that tech to basically incorporate building up structure inside structures. So this is like a boundary. And I just left the mesh there so I could at least be able to ascertain visually like where the zone is without having to like remember and guess or draw a debug box constantly every frame, and that's expensive. So the idea is like if I build this, it does a check and it's like, oh, which zone am I in? I'm in this zone? Okay, cool. Assign this structure to this zone. So if there's a power requirement, if you have a generator, then it knows to register with that zone and be able to do like whatever you do. So if I build a generator, it doesn't support it now because I was more so prototyping the concept. But the idea is that like going into Monday, I'm going to add it into like building these generators. It does that check. It finds what zone is in the area of responsibility it is, and then it adds the sector-based power. Because we did that poll about a month or two ago, and you guys wanted us to go on the route of, instead of doing the small little circles and regional power and having the pylons and all the other stuff, you guys wanted us to pivot, and I wanted to pivot in terms of having it to where you could have sector-based power. And that way it would take a little bit less micromanaging off the game, and you could like basically have like power bases or subdivisions in the back of the base, the center of your base, that power the entire grid as a whole. So this is working towards that goal of having it to where like you can see it checked every sector in the area, and it was like, oh, I'm inside this zone. And what it does is it uses a very complicated mathematical algorithm to look at the curvature of this object and determine, am I inside of it or am I outside of it? And then based off of that, it's able to deduce, like, okay, like I need to provide power to this zone. But then if you build like right outside the zone, like right here, it's going to be red, red, red. Where it's like, I'm not in that zone, I'm not in that zone, I'm not in that zone. This object is not owned by any of the zones in the game. And this is for the civilian admin. This is for the power. Potentially other systems in the future for tracking AI and being able to track objects inside of zones. So we can do logic associated to what area an infected or a civilian is in, so we can do better management. And doing it in a way that wasn't reliant on overlaps or complicated traces or anything that basically adds a lot of overhead to the project. Because previously in Legacy, we did everything via overlaps. On overlap begins, on overlap ends. And that's great for if you're a very small scale game of like 20, 40 AI, maybe even 100. But once you get into the point where we had like 300 to 400 AI, you know, the on overlaps, just we're adding a lot of cost to like keeping those things registered. Because think of it this way. It's like every millisecond, am I touching you? Am I touching you now? Am I touching you? Like, it's that kind of deal. Where the idea is that, like, you figure it's a continual check at the high level in their native code that's like, hey, like, am I overlapping this object? And it would do it every tick. And that's just how game engines work, is that generally, like, the kind of game engines that we use every day, like, they're meant for, like, 20, 40, 60 AI at most. And games like Space Marine, World War Z, Days Gone, they have to heavily customize and optimize and tweak and basically like edit things to make it to where you can facilitate and support more AI at runtime. So this is a system that what do you think?
That's something we haven't done in a long time. Is
I know we got to play it again. That game is so much fun. Sort of, but you can see like yeah. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it is. It truly is. And if you guys
I want
are
to play it again
aspiring
for
to
fun,
sort of do something like that,
I have so much fun. We played it, and I never got to actually experience the first person mode. But they came out with all these DLCs and expansions, and they have it on the Epic Game Store. I wish I would have bought it on Steam, just because. Yeah, we need to set up a game night and just play with all the devs and just torture everyone. Because I know Michael hates it. Fuck him. He's gonna play it. It's. We're building fuck him. It's team morale. Drag him in the game. But yeah, no, because like you figure and you can see like every zone is basically flagging like the zone that it's in and its area of responsibility. So it's cool. I'm happy with it. I need to do some more like edge testing before I scale it up, where it's like, let me go in on lit mode so you can see. But like if you have two zones and they're overlapping each other, I need to solve those issues going into Monday. And then I need to solve it to where, because Derek brought this to my attention and I barely got the prototype working. And then I was like, I need to have a percent-based system. So if a level designer or a modder in the future has two objects, these invisible zones that are like representing two different zones, two different areas in the game, if they overlap, it needs to know whatever area of the structure is overlapping this box the most. Choose one, but you can't have both. You can't have, you know what I mean? Like it's only one or the other. So it's one of those things where I got to kind of go in on Monday and set up those systems. Because if I eject and click on this box and scroll down, you'll see that it says like, oh, there's an ADS that's debug registered. And if I go to that one, it's like, oh, there's a guard tower and the generator and the spotlight. And then I go to that one, and it's like, oh, it's just the garrison tent. So it's one of those things where like you figure, kind of ratcheting that up and getting it to a point where we're happy with just generally the registration and the performance that we're aiming for when it comes down to how these systems are implemented and programmed before we scale up. Because we don't want to make the same mistake we made before where we're just kind of putting things in to make people happy, which is not a bad thing, but it's like we need to make sure we're taking the time to build the foundation and make sure that it's scalable and it's easily extendable. Because I gave you an example. There's another thing that I have to work on going into this week, which is going to be the power component, where it's going to be like systems like the ADS are going to have like a new component where it's like it's able to check the zone that it's registered to, and be able to say like, okay, this is how I interact and exchange power, whether it be adding power or taking power away. So it's one of those things, and then that will be instrumental for like the gates and the ADS and the barracks and other things that require power to operate. Is like it's a modular, really easable way. So I can add new structures I can add units that create power. I can add vehicles that create power. I can add, structures that create power, and it's very extendable and it's very moddable. So it's just one of those things that we're just kind of thinking about of like, it's like what's the word? A Swiss Army knife, where you can kind of like take these actor components of how we've developed this game this time around and make it to where we can like have a doctrine where there's like a vehicle that you can deploy for power with this setup. I can have, with the way we did the construction manager, I can have a vehicle that could operate just like the engineer, as a doctrine vehicle in the future. And it's just easily just kind of plug and play, where I can click on this little Timmy here and we have a building component which allows them, that manages all their logic, and that dictates, can they repair? Can they build? What can they build? What can they repair? And, we'll extend it and improve it as things change here and there, or we want to like ratchet things up. But that's why, like, you figure, where it's like my argument of like why some things might take a little bit longer, or some weeks might seem like we're not doing as much, or it's not as much to show, we're not posting as much, is we're just kind of looking at systems like that, looking at what people have said historically over years, and we're like, well, we want to be able to kind of do this or do that or do this in a couple of years, do that in a year, do that in 3 months, do that in 6 months. And it's just kind of like looking at all that and being like, well, we need to do it in this way. So when we do have a playtest and we have this or that, it's able to, do everything we want it to do and do it very quickly and very efficiently. I apologize for the debug lines. It was just one of the things that I was literally working on this at midnight last night. And it shows. Or basically, like, there's just a lot of visual clutter going on to basically just test and refine everything. Let me pull up the next note that I have here. Hold on. We're gonna say what?
Burn him at the stake.
Okay.
Burn him at the stake for the debug.
Right. So the next thing I was working on, which I don't know. No, I can't show that, because the problem is I commented out the code because it was screwing with Derek's work. Is that I'll just talk about it in basically practicality, and you guys will know that what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. So in Legacy, and I've talked to Terminal and a bunch of other people in her mega thread. This is the biggest thing that's stopping me from adding more decorations into the game and adding a lot more structures and just being able to like add like jersey dividers. And like concrete solid walls, like prototype, and just more intricate, more complicated objects, is that I want to fix how their AI perceive and understand walls. Because everyone here has played the game. Everyone kind of knows that the juggernauts, the leviathans, sometimes they're kind of retarded. And they'll dance along a wall, or they'll go up and down, or it takes them a little bit longer than they should to understand and perceive their environment, so they can actually be like, a juggernaut should know right here, coming to your wall, I've already made my decision. I'm going to just run into your wall like a gorilla, charge into it, and apply massive damage instantly in that moment. There's no walk here, maybe go a little bit to the left, maybe go a little bit to the right. Maybe I want to go to that wall. Maybe I want to go to that wall. Maybe none of the walls. And they do this retarded shit sometimes where it's like, and I've been trying to figure out an R&D way of improving it, because the Unreal Engine does not have a lot of mechanisms or tools in place to be able to facilitate and detect those kind of obstacles natively. So whatever I do is custom, building within the framework of how the engine operates. So I've been prototyping, and I'll show you a GIF that I have here, where basically, let me just copy that there. I've been prototyping, and the other thing I've been working on this week is setting up a system where the goal is that red spear. We have a goal or a squad manager for AI. And the idea is every AI that is assigned in the game is assigned to a squad, a group, or some kind of coordinator. And then that coordinator answers to a faction manager. The faction manager passes down initiatives, goals. I want everyone in this zone dead. You know, I kill all the Circ in this base, you know, kind of deal. Kill all the anarchists, kill all the dynamic civilian groups. So the faction manager assigns a directive. Then it creates squads. Then it's up to the squads to basically, at their own discretion, execute however they feel best based off of where they spawned, their disposition of troops, and then basically like being able to analyze and understand the world. So this was my progress that I had in terms of basically writing a system where it's able to creep the navigation mesh. I can hear you talking to your cat. You're good. We basically it's able to creep the navigation mesh, locate the wall, determine the 2 walls that it needs to target, add that as a goal. They reach the wall, they attack the wall directly, and then when the wall is broken, they reevaluate to their goal to figure out is there something else they need to prioritize, or can they move to their goal directly? And that's one of the things that I've been working on prototyping this week. And I had, let me see, I had different amounts of success and failure this week in terms of basically its implementation. It was one of those things where like I had to take a couple of days just to get a little bit more tangible work to show you guys going into like today. So I took a day or two just to focus on like the zone and the power system because that's an easy win, an easy thing just to knock out and be done. But like this is one of the proof of concepts that I was doing where like it would like do these weird curvatures and like inefficient paths that I need to work out mathematically. Like there it goes, they fixed right there. But it added that weird slant, whereas like it should have just known to hit the wall directly, and then be able to do the rating system and be able to basically determine like, hey, like I need to destroy this wall or this wall, and based off of the perceived size of my attacking party, this is how much we need to destroy to keep our movement like fluid, keep it moving, keep it efficient kind of deal. We don't need to destroy every wall. We only need to destroy what's necessary to get in and kill everyone. So if there's only like 20 infected, there's no point they're going to play this one, this one, this one, this one. They're going to hit this one and this one potentially based off of their perceived width, and they're going to come in and kill everyone. They're not going to sit here and like lily-dally around with like defensive small little objects here. You know, if there's no threat being generated by a nearby object like a turret or a guard tower or a circ, they're going to prioritize what's going to allow them to reach their target. And if they can't reach their target, their damager, they're going to determine, oh, there's something blocking me. Let me prioritize this first and then reevaluate at that point. I still can't reach the person that's hurting me. I have a more superseding goal, you know, kind of deal. And it's about finding a checks and balance for those systems and making sure we're hitting the right sophistication for the AI, but not applying like a really unruly high cost like calculation for like their logic kind of deal. So it's a very fine balance in terms of how deep in the weeds we go. But it's one of the major design goals that I've wanted to do for years is situate that. And there's no time than the better to implement the squad manager and get it in at a foundational standpoint. And we can always build and improve and tweak and tie it into other systems in the future, like virtualization via devirtualization as an example. Where like in pandemic, towards the end of the last 1 or 2 years of our development, we ended up taking armies that were off like across the map, and we would turn them into like a civilization army with like one like an avatar, and then a representation of like their attack power or their defense power, and then they would roll and do stuff across the map, and that way we could keep the world rolling, keep it fluid. But when you went over there, they would devirtualize and spawn and fake what they were doing in gameplay, and that was one way we were able to kind of keep the performance higher on a very large, like a large map and keep it fluid where there was always something going on and you were incentivized to kind of explore and see what was like this group killed that group. The infected rolled everyone in this entire province and they put up some resistance, so there's still remnants of like the dynamic civilian group. So that squad manager kind of ties into the virtualization for the pandemic system and being able to take those squads and those groups and virtualize them when it comes to the AI to keep the game lean and cheap from a performance standpoint and keep the world still simulating in a lively fashion per se. So let me check my notes. Yeah.
See, I find that quite fascinating. This whole squad manager thing, like the whole faction manager and squad manager, because it's like it adds that sort of dynamic, sort of intuitiveness to the game. You know, and it genuinely feels like, well, it'll make the game feel like truly something that has never been done before. Yeah, it will make
Yes.
Cepheus
No, I
unique
get what you're saying.
as
It's
far
one of
as
those things where, like, a lot of games don't go that deep in the weeds. When I was researching it, is generally they fall down to just general rock, paper, scissors, mass a shit ton of units, send them against each other, and you'll notice that when you play a lot of other games where they do behind the scenes, give them more money, give them a higher frequency of money, and do mutilators or handicaps, or just literally just have it where they just spam a couple of units, and that's it. Like, that's the most that they go for complexity. And we wanted to try and go a little further than that and see how far we could push the needle. Even if we can't get everything in on the first get-go, we'll build the foundation with the squad manager. We'll get it so at the base minimum they understand walls and how to do like goals in terms of the confines of those walls, and then we can expand that system over months to years of whatever people feel like is needed by looking at playtests and looking at save files and looking at bases and seeing, like, when do they fail? How can we improve that? Because the system that I want to try and get in around the time, we're not going to put it in now, we'll put it in around stage 2 for pandemic when it's needed, when the maps are larger, is having it to where the squads can reform, can break apart, and can basically have tactics. To where it's like, this is the base, our squad has 100 people, 25, 25, 25, 25, like that kind of shit, where they all break up and they attack different parts of your wall. And a system like that is not that crazy to do. It's just, I don't want to invest that many crazy resources in at this time based off of, like, the maps aren't large enough, and we need to get a playtest going. We need to kind of get the rest of phase 1 going. So I want to focus on getting phase 1 done, getting the playtest in y'all's hands, and then when we'll do the doctrines, we'll do the vehicles, we'll do the airstrikes, we get all the call-in stuff, and then phase 3 starts, and we'll do that kind of preliminary stuff where we're like, okay, now we need to take the squad manager a little bit more over the top because we have larger maps, we have higher infected counts, we have reoccurring affected, and it's an actual back and forth battle over a horde mode that we're using for an early preliminary test, where it's like just waves that are coming at you every once in a while. So the amount of tactics that they can interject, it's very here or there. But when you have like a consistent battle and people are actually building bases and it's a tug of war back and forth and there's a little more tactics involved, then that's when I feel like we would go and we take the squad manager a couple more notches up the belt. Well, we want to keep the autonomy of the individual trooper, like the spinner or the blow-up guy or the standard infected. We don't want to preordain every move on a squad level to where they lose their autonomy and their ability to surprise you. But there needs to be like global reaching initiatives or goals of like, this squad's going this way, that squad's going that way, and they're both going to be in the center and pincer you. You're in the center, so they're going to be like, okay, we're going to hit them on both sides, that kind of shit. Because I've said this before, and I'll say it again, is that you figure the infected and legacy, I feel, are underutilized. Even at their lower population is like 100 or 200, sometimes they push as high as 250. Like, if they actually utilize better tactics, even against your superior weapons, they'd fucking destroy you. In terms of basically like the amount of units they can bring to bear, how quickly they can bring them to bear, and actually having tactics that are not just build a bunch of infected, build some blow-up guys, build some spitter guys, market line them. I'm sure somebody's going to get through eventually. You know what I mean? Like, that tactic is nice for like preliminary early access stuff, but like that's one of the things that I kind of seek to rectify with this rebuild in layers. We're building the foundation for the squad manager. We're doing the whole wall thing for the first playtest as the first stepping stone. And then we get the pandemic in stage 3. And we're like, okay, now we're going to ratchet it up. We're going to add more layers. We're going to put some more helpers in. And we're going to make it to where they're a little more sophisticated in how they do their target acquisition and their goaling, I guess you can say. Okay, so one of the other things, and this might be a little bit weird because there were some changes that came in for the turret that might have broken it, but I'll show it anyway, is that we had a bug, and I showed it last week, where sometimes when you'd switch weapons between the client and the host for operator, the weapon switching would break. So we did manage to fix that. Michael is working on some equip and de-equip generalized animations for the operator. just to make them flow a little bit better and make it to where like it just doesn't look like it's like as gamey. So that's gonna come in on the 11th hour. Basically just getting that situated, but that is something that we're looking at from Michael's standpoint to fit that in alongside doing the weapons and all that. Because he's been just kind of going through and ratcheting up the weapons and then working with some of the people that have done the weapon support pack over the last week and the civilian support packs that basically like they choose a weapon every quarter. I think there's one guy that we're still working on the details for that, but he said he was just going to do a lottery every quarter and just have a poll, and he'll just let people basically pick weapons to add every quarter. So we're figuring that out with him, and when we have more details with that, we'll have like a poll or like a thing where you guys can pick weapons with Michael, and he'll just pick it and he'll just add it to like an operator or whatever. I already showed that weapon actually. Let me see. Oh right, it's this one. He's been remodeling and improving the M249 this week. If I can bloody bring that over. So just like little stuff like that. He's been kind of cleaning it up because when it was made previously, we had different stands in place and different poly count restrictions. So it was one of those things where like he wanted to go back and just kind of clean it, just ratchet it up a little bit. So he's been cleaning it up, increasing the poly count for modern standards a little bit more, and just adding more aggressive LODs so that way it works and it's scalable for it's like larger RTS scale. Let me go ahead and let me bring up the. Hold on. I showed that. Yeah. Okay. Duravar, did you have any questions for me from any of the stuff I've been working on before we move on to Chris?
Oh
Lord.
I had, but I
Okay.
got distracted. No, I've got them. I'm still written them down. I'm terrible at remembering
So
things.
Chris, how was it for the book? You told me you finished like the basic draft. Did you want to talk about it a little bit?
No, I didn't finish the draft. I was able to get back to work on it this past week and got
Okay.
2 chapters finished. That what I uploaded, that's
the
the
layout.
remember you asked
Yeah,
for
the
like
outline.
breakdown. Yeah, so I'm just doing it chapter by chapter because I said I didn't really fully plot out the book. But yeah, it's been the first week since I'm about to properly get back on my computer and stare at the screen for a few hours about going mad. And got those 2 chapters done, and I think now, based on where the story is gone, that probably maybe only about 5 more chapters, and then
Okay.
it's going to be done completely. But right now it's at like I think 45,000 words, which is like double the length of the previous book and around the length
How you
of the
feel about it
first
so
one.
far? Like, are there any like goals or like things that you're trying to hit upon this time around for the book, or like?
I just wanted much I don't know, more sophisticated writing. Like I said, I had when I finished school and I learned a whole bunch of new tricks, and I wanted to incorporate that into this book. I think Natalie's character has gone in a completely different way than what like I'd originally ever planned for. I think she's a much more fleshed out human character, less of just like this psycho bitch who just wants to like see the world burn. Yeah, so there was some things that I like on the first chapter. I left like a certain like not necessarily put myself into a corner, but I was like, I'm gonna leave this and I'm gonna see where the story goes, and then I'm gonna have her make the decision. So I think I've gotten to that point where it alters her course of her character going forward from what she used to be, but also kind of sets up as to who she's going to become as the eventually as the story of the game progresses further.
No, I dig it.
Yeah, so I'm generally quite happy with it.
No, I dig it. Anything you want to add to that, Duravar, from your standpoint?
I personally I'm pretty excited to actually give this a read. I love game based stories. I don't read a whole lot of them.
Yeah, there's not honestly a lot.
The BioShock
not a lot
one's
of good
really
ones.
good.
Yeah, there's not a lot.
I fucking love the BioShock
I've actually
book.
never read that one.
Like you figure like it makes you want to play the game so badly.
But like going off of what Chris has said and going off of how much clearly how dedicated he is to fleshing out the characters and making them, feel like individuals and make their motives really good, right? It actually sounds like a really good read, and I am quite eager to.
What do you think the themes
sort
are
of
this
get
time
into
around,
it.
Chris, with how it parallels to the original and the Pierce book?
I'm pretty
Okay.
awful when it comes to themes. Yeah, it's like one of the things where, like, every writer out there says, "Oh, you got to figure out your themes and before you write your first word," and others say you wait until the end. I am awful when it comes to figuring out what a theme of a character or a book is. I mean, survival is really one of the key factors here. Because I did want to put her in, like, I try to think of, like, if you're the gamer reading the book, you'd be like, "Oh, I did this in the game," or I see, like, this is like what's going on behind the scenes. But sure, you're a Cirque, but like I understand, like, why these civilians down the street might be mad at me because she's going through similar situations, and just the kind of, like, societal breakdown and how good people can become bad. Like they always say, we're like, what is it, like 3
Kind of like
meals away
Negan,
from
where it was like
anarchy.
he was like, well,
And
to a certain degree,
that,
he was kind of he was a high school teacher.
yeah, he was
but
what, a
he was
high
like
school
the most
teacher,
horrible
gym
person
teacher?
ever. He had his redemption arc.
Yeah, because
Yeah, you
yeah, I
hated
never
him.
actually finished his final seasons, but yeah, he definitely had his little arc. I mean, I loved him regardless. I still, that's why I want to watch the New York one, because he's
Yeah,
like
he's
the
the
only
only
character
character I
I
like
really
because
hang on to
they
still.
took Rick out,
But
but
yeah,
they brought him back, and yeah, it's not the same.
yeah, let's not talk about that. No, but I mean, I do keep Walking Dead quite much in front of my mind. I'm actually gonna. Khaleesi wants to go back and
Oh, I
play the
remember
old
that.
Telltale
Yeah, from back in the day.
Walking Dead games.
I
Yeah,
never
I love
finished the
that.
one when she
I
got
love
older.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
Uh,
I just never had the time to sit down and play it enough for like the after the first one. Like, was you,
yeah, I think there's 3 of them, and she's like a teenager in the
yeah.
third one. I have the first 2.
I actually have to try those.
But yeah, I keep that in. Yeah, I keep those in mind, like when I'm writing this, and and so like a lot of themes they kind of carry over from that point. But right now, I definitely would say that survival is the principal theme, and there's probably a couple others in there. I'm just, like I said, I'm not
Okay,
good at nailing themes down. I'm sure other readers will pull their own
I dig it.
themes into it.
I gotta turn off those bloody debug alarms. Hold on. I'm like having a heart attack because I can't even reliably. Oh, they're hard debug alarms. They're not tied to the bool, so they're in the C++. I'll have to look into that later and properly tie them to the bool. I just really wanted to show just generally like how we have for the turrets and everything else. Next week we'll have the other turret to show as well, so I'll show a unified defense, the MG version.
Which one?
This is more of the anti-armored version, but I'm using it as like a hammer kind of deal, where it's like its fire rate needs to be slowed down, and it needs to not be an auto cannon is the only problem. I don't care if it's like that in real life, but this is the game and it has to be balanced. So it's one of those things where, like, you figure we're gonna have to slow it down substantially, probably give it around 5 to 10 shots, maybe even 2 to 3, and make it to where this is your Juggernaut killer, this is your Leviathan killer. It's not meant to be a jack of all trades real life tank gun, because balance matters at the end of the day. So I'll get with Michael and we'll figure out a decision there, because it's shooting those HE rounds that you see there that explode, and then it does an AoE. There is some shatter penetration that Derek put in over the week for projectiles, where projectiles can hit one person, and then they'll lose a little bit of their velocity, and they'll go and they'll have a limit of how many they could hit, per se. But you can figure, oh no, it's getting dark. This is the perfect excuse to show it. So I'll grab this, and if I could properly click and find an area to build in. We definitely need to put some time in to just finalize the radiuses of the flashlights, because I put in very preliminary basic values, but it shows. It is so bloody dark. Oh, I'm
You're not
not?
showing anything yet, by the way.
Oh.
No,
No.
it's on the. There you go.
So here, let me show you what I have. So I built this little base while Chris was talking about his book. And ignore the sun, ignore the sun, not the sun, the stars. It's not final. But the idea is I built this little base with the operator. And then I've been just running around looking for cracks and just making sure they haven't broken through. You can see that they're moving over there from that direction to attack. So I might grab some of my operators or my engineers, move them to the left flank, potentially destroy the barracks, and we'll see if we can't oh, yeah. There's a system right there where it's deducing my goal is there. I need to destroy that wall and then kill everyone inside. So they don't do any of that weird dancing they would do in Legacy where it's like, oh, what do I do? You know, sometimes I'm tired of it. Oh, there's a crash there. Isn't that kawaii? So we added a new system called an aim source. And I guess there wasn't enough playtesting that went in yesterday or the day before. So there's a random crash that we get sometimes. Because, let me explain this. Is that when you have a gun in a video game, and you have a muzzle. And this muzzle right here is where you're creating the bullet, and you're doing all that. If a juggernaut or a leviathan or a big enough enemy is able to clip into this gun in some shape, manner, or form, they refuse to shoot because you know what I mean. Like it's basically like beyond where like it's inside of them. So it's like a mathematical thing where we ended up going with an idea that there's an aim source where they shoot and the particle effect spawns from here, but the bullet is actually coming from somewhere around here. So then that way we can have a margin of safety for the RTS units. And that's why in some earlier builds of the game around like 2022 and 2023, people were like saying that the units weren't reliably like shooting and defending themselves. And we realized it was because the infected were getting so close to people for their melee animations and for their other combat that it would make it to where effectively they would not, if they were so close that the traces would fail. So we were like, okay, we need to add an aim source system. So then that way we're able to project backwards and be able to have like a safety margin for our turrets and for our weapons so they can get super hyper close and not, affect their ability to like shoot and stuff like that. So here, let me go ahead and let me see if I can get these defenses up. Hold on. Let's see. Someone's spitting at me. What a Mac asshole. And then we're definitely going to have to expand the amount of icons that we have here. We're going to have to add a couple of extra buttons. That is kawaii. Okay, hold on. I think these bugs were just fixed. I was I'm copying and pasting them. Let me just move this over here so I can actually show you guys this and it doesn't bloody crash. Hold on. Okay, it's done. And then use theirs. Open the project again. I apologize. Some of these changes, these edits, come in on the 11th hour, hours before the podcast, minutes before the podcast, because everyone on the team has weird work schedules and weird sleeping schedules or whatever. So sometimes things can come in raw, literally at like before we even start, because people just have to get their work done, stuff. So let's see generally how it runs this time. And that way I can try and show you guys what we've been doing. So let me do that, and then do this. We're going to build that and do a closed junction there. And then we're going to grab the other engineer. We're going to build a turret here, a turret here, turret there, turret there. Put some guard towers up. Oh yeah, no, it's still crashing. Okay, well then that's gonna be a wrap. I can't show that aspect of it. I think it's the new turrets, but I don't know. A programmer is trying to fix it in the back end, but I don't think it's gonna get fixed in time. I just will not build those, so I can show everything else. Help out. Do something useful. With the auto repair system, these guys, I just have to tell them to do one section of the wall, and then they'll automatically join in and do the rest of the walls. That guy is bugging out. I think there were some recent changes that happened to the construction manager that make it to where sometimes the auto repairs aren't as reliable as they were a week ago. So I had to look into that. And that was a physics bug because I minimized the write some bugs down. It says I pause and unpause so the time dilation changes. And then the ragdolls basically don't know how to account for the loss in time. So they essentially slingshot. Yeah, I think it is the new turrets. The new turrets are basically causing a crash. If I were to assume because of their aim source code is exception or something that's not being checked properly in terms of safeties. Let's go ahead and let's show the weapons. Get some snipers in to do long range kill shots. Intermingle them with some LMGs. That's always a good combination for blow up guys versus standard infected. You can also see the MOs in. I neglected to mention that earlier. I apologize. Is that we got the MO in, and they actually do have to resupply now. If I click on the barracks and I go to the resupply component, yeah, they extinguished all the supply. Let me go ahead and increase that to like a crap ton for the time being, and then move them out of the radius, and then move them back into the radius, and then they'll get their ammo. See, now they're getting their ammo. Yeah, now they all got their ammo because it went through and it basically gave them all that. That is because we haven't done a playtest. We need to go through and make it to where some resupply components have infinite supply instead of just typing in a really crazy number. We need to have a bool here that basically says infinite for like a barracks or a motor pool, or so then that way you can do that. I want to keep it that way, but I don't know if Terminal and other people are going to abuse it, so maybe I have to just make it to where everything has a finite amount of supply. I'll have to theory craft that and talk it over with some of the devs. Yeah, you can see this engineer here is bugging out, and so is this one. So they're stuck in a non-combat state for whatever reason. They can't even right-click to shoot, so we'll have to look into that. It's because they built recently. Something was changed with the construction manager that's causing them to bug out. Let's see if I build a wall, if they magically fix. Okay. Oh yeah, there's the system again. So that's my waypoint system working to a certain degree. Their goal is that target, and they're basically saying we don't need to destroy anything. We could destroy that wall to make it where we turn that corner a little more efficiently, but they made a decision not to. At least some of them did, at least. But if you see the string, that means that they are like, maybe we should destroy it. Maybe it'll speed it up a little bit. Oh my god, it's dark. Let's get a gate here. Oh, I'm broke. That would probably matter. Yeah, oh Jesus.
Are we all?
Oh, they pathfinder to the gate. Oh, they're gonna try and use my gate. That's kawaii. Let me just close the gate to screw them. That's the other thing is we gotta add a nav. We gotta add a nav modifier there so they don't try and go through your gates when it's closed like that. Well, it's in automatic mode, so I guess technically it's fair game, but we have to look into that and change that because that's gonna be annoying. Oh yeah, those two. Do I have one still alive? Yeah, you're one. And that's the other issue that we have to work on for the target acquisition is sometimes they bypass you. So it's just a matter of just kind of getting the last elements of the stage 1 stuff in and then doing a bug hunt, a very extensive bug hunt. They just kind of hunt down these outliers that I'm showing you guys right now.
I actually really like.
Yeah, it looks
how
dark.
dark
In the legacy version,
adds to it.
we intentionally inflate the darkness so then that way it's not as overwhelming. And it's like we have to kind of make a decision in terms of like how horror, because we want to go the horror route like prototype or whatnot where it's like darker like that. But there's also the idea of accessibility where it's like you can't go too crazy because if you go true darkness, you cannot see what is going on. Like, oh fuck, something's spitting me. See, that's what I mean. It's like I'm getting swiped right now. Like literally a spitter just hit me from the darkness and I didn't even know where it was coming from.
Assassin's Creed Shadows
does?
has that problem of darkness. Yeah,
I
it's
think
incredibly dark.
legitimately-
Well, see, Armory Forge is the same. Like you desperately need it.
I think because I died, it legitimately threw me back in. So yeah, that's where it comes for that. There's definitely some bugs we need to hunt down and ratchet up to clean up that. I think that pretty much concludes essentially that aspect of it. Okay, well then let's go ahead and open it up for questions and we'll go from there. So push it back to the main room. And what kind of questions do you guys have? X, Y, and Z for us.
Pre-cause TTV had will AI be using the scaling of buildings to bypass walls from the assumption of understanding our wall positions, trying to find the path
So
of least
the idea is that system that I showed you earlier that I was prototyping is the idea is that it takes into account everything. So it does a trace. No, it's not even a trace. It's a navigation check that basically checks how can I reach this goal, and basically reach it in a way where I'm going to try and maintain the cohesion of the unit. So it doesn't care. It only cares about path costs. So if it's cheaper in terms of movement, to take that route, they will take that route. If it's cheaper to go the route of land, they'll take that route. But I don't want to make it to where they're all knowing autonomous gods. So it's a very fair balance in terms of like kind of going in the direction of the forest, where if they have pre-cached, pre-saved information of a disposition of a base, an area, then yeah, we'll make meaningful decisions for that when we get to implementing those aspects in Pandemic. But when it comes to like a query across the map, if it seems shorter, they'll take buildings. If it seems shorter or faster, then they'll take the ground. It just depends on the nuance of where they're going and how they have to get there. Because the same way that we have this little doohickey here, it's just going to be a simple thing like in World War Z, where they run to the wall, they have a preset location, we interpolate them up the wall and a loop or climbing animation, then we toss them over the top. And because this system is baked into the navigation from a fundamental standpoint, is you can set them as one ways or two ways or however you want to do it. So we're going to be using that as a foundational piece to make it to where when they do those fine paths, they'll take these nav links into account and they'll be able to determine like, hey, I shouldn't take this path because it's going to add on 500 cost or 200 cost. Because you do costing entry fees and numbers of floats. So it's one of those things where like you might see it sometimes, you might not see it that often, depending on just where you're building and you know the happenstance of what's going on in that moment. What other questions do we have? And while you do that, it's something I have to show from Efron that he snuck into the channel. So this is what Efron was talking about earlier for the guard tower. He was modeling that as we speak. But anyhow, let's see what we have here.
So, I don't know if that's Panicky or P3 Mickey. There was a talk about adding procedural growth for the infection, like on buildings and on the streets. Is it still something that would be implemented before or after the main campaign?
I am so sorry. I was reading a note my programmer wrote for me. Can you say that question one more time?
There was talk about adding procedural growth for infection, like on buildings and on the streets. Is it still something that would be implemented before / after?
I don't have an ETA for that yet. It's PCG, procedural content generation, and we want to do it. Last time we did it, it was just too expensive and too hard to maintain. There's a couple of technical things that we need to overcome to be able to do it to the sophistication level that I want to do it to, because I want to do it like in prototype, but I want to do it in a way where it's not static and it dynamically grows and it dynamically infests certain areas of the map. So from a technical standpoint, it's one of those things where it's kind of like we have the assets made, but like I need to be able to take off. Like me and Dimitri and Derek have to go off in a corner for a month just to prototype it, play test it, get it working. And with everything else going on right now, we can't focus that just yet. So it's a wish list item. And it's one of those things that we need to look into in the foreseeable future. But yeah, what else do we have for that? Let's see if I can update again and see if it works.
Let's have a...
Maybe it's a full rebuild I need to do on the C++. Huh.
I think this is a question. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe what
I don't know if it's a question or a statement. I tend to abuse the landscape and indestructible walls like Bluecrest PD and the estate walls, double layering it with HESCO barriers along my walls. The area's walls, there's a lot of walls, and double barbed wire. I imagine that will deter them.
They will analyze the cost of every object and minimize the amount of damage or exposure they have to do. So the idea is that, yeah, that's going to help you, but they're going to you solve alliance. So the idea is that they're going to look at the world and be like, oh, I'm going to destroy this and that and immediately bypass the rest. So the idea is the system is meant to be intelligent enough to where they can exploit the weaknesses in your defenses. So then that way it ups the ante of like if you aren't paying attention to like every little nuance and every little corner, they will find it and they will exploit it. So yeah, to a certain degree, it incentivizes people to really double down and be good base builders. And I'm sure you'll be able to find some cases where you can bypass it or be able to circumvent it based off of the nuances of level design, but I'm coming for you in terms of basically like your base density, where it's like, I don't want that to be exploitable. I don't want it to be easy. I want it to be where there's an intentionality in how you lay out your base, how you design it, and it's not exploitable. Like an example would be what Krieg Corpse posted in the public Discord. I'm gonna bring up that picture where like this is an example of one of the bases that he would build, and what Efron said is that area was built intentionally for that way, so you could exploit and have your 2 lays in, but it's also a death trap in terms of basically just like them understanding and being able to perceive their environment a little more intelligently. Because you figure they might deem it's not necessary to achieve their goals to attack that, and they might instead pick at your outer defenses or pick at other areas that are weaker, and then come to that later on, over the course of time. Because me and Michael were talking about this yesterday, and it comes down to basically implementing or doing some kind of volume-based no man's land, and the idea is that over time of them taking losses, they would identify or mark zones as basically like, don't come here, don't go here, unless you come with this density of units. So then that way you don't get the constant maggot lines where they're sending out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys and there's no progress being made. There's no actual movement. So it's one of those things where we're working to basically like ratchet up to in layers, where it's like right now we have the squad manager, we have the fundamental system, and then we're going to, as we get into stage 3, we do like the pandemic systems, ratcheting up and kind of making those improvements. What else do we have for questions?
So on the YouTube side, Krieg
Yeah.
von Clapper, I love that name. Would you be able to climb up the tower, the watchtower, at any time in the future?
You mean for like the operator? No, for this time right now, I molded over based off what you asked last week. For the time being, I'm going to leave the operator tower, the tower alone for the guard tower. And that's something we'll look into in the future, because I'm very conscious of adding too much extra stuff right now. My goal is to basically just try and get something out that you guys can play test the next week or two. And we have a lot of work ahead of ourselves to get it all, as you saw, to get it to the point where everyone's happy and it's fully playable. And that we've refined and found those bugs that you saw earlier in the stream. So right now it's not a priority, and that might come later down the line for being able to be an operator in the tower shooting stuff. Right now you'll be more limited to just finding a inclined heightened position and just shooting from there kind of deal. What else do we have for questions?
YouTube, Alexander M. What will Alcatraz be? Will it have PvP or will it be PvE?
No, Alcatraz is purely the main menu, and it's a new island on Pandemic's map, where it's like we're trying to bring the Bay Area map in alignment with what it is in real life, of like editing and augmenting Major Island, Treasure Island, Alcatraz, and the mainland San Francisco, and adding the Golden Gate and the Oakland Bay Bridge and the interconnection between all those points. So right now, that's our focus. There's no focus on PvP. The entire game is focused on the PvE, playing that, focusing on that, balancing it, and getting it to a point where we're happy with it. And then obviously doing the co-op at the same time for the Cirque be infected. And then at that point, when everything's done, everything's situated, we'll revisit it and look at what we can and cannot do. But for the time being, I'm going to say that PvP is not in the cards. What else do we have? Because again, the co-op is like a first incubator or test bed for how far we can push the replication and the performance and the optimization and all these systems. And we'll act accordingly based off of the constraints of tech and everything else. Because like Chris and I talked about a couple months ago, there are some things you want to do, but you can't do because the technology doesn't allow. Where it's like we'd like to have 1,000, 2,000 infected, but to do that in a manageable, sizable way and not negatively affect gameplay and the fidelity and the quality we want to aim for is not possible. You lose something by going to those numbers in terms of basically like the individual soldier, the individual moments kind of deal. And that's something we're not willing to compromise on by like doing these really weird like faked animations that are just textures that you're playing on a character that are 2D sprites that like some other games do, where they do their animations as sprites and you don't even do it, and you have to like put it in middle ground software, and then you convert it via frame rate, and you can't even play proper animations, and it just becomes a mess. It becomes a nightmare in terms of your gameplay loop and how you operate and do damage, and the most basic of elements are crazy. Anyhow, what else do we have for questions?
Let's see. I think. Hang on, I'm just checking both.
Oh, there's a question for Krieger on
Not
Discord.
really seeing anything.
For the final
Oh.
product in the far future, is there intent to use map locations for side objectives like power plant or substations to ensure the lights continue to go on with high unrest and infection? And will suggestions reopen? Absolutely. Suggestions will reopen the moment we have a viable first build where we can basically have you guys actually play it. And it's like, we need to get to the end of phase 1, going to phase 2. And that's when suggestions will be reopened again. That's when the bug reporting will be reopened again. Because right now, there's no point to it for the current onset of what's on like experimental or normal, because those builds are discontinued, their legacy, that code base is completely different. So it's one of those things where it'd be a waste of your time to just even report it. And for suggestions, we're not taking those right now, in moderation, obviously, in the podcast, because we already have a lot to do and bang out when it comes to the core what we're rebuilding right now. So it'd be overwhelming. It would be impossible to keep any kind of schedule if we were continually adding new things to the suggestions. Right now, I'm just trying to do the bare minimum that's required. Sounds like a bad way of framing it. To get what we had previously, make the improvements that are necessary, that are mission critical from Legacy, and get that back in y'all's hands. Me and Chris were talking about this earlier. We're a month behind at this point. Maybe a month and change. But like him and I were going back and forth, we can kind of justify it based off of, we can justify it because of the manpower. Like we can only put so much in a day with 2 programmers. And at the same time, it comes down to the quality over quantity of making sure, like the active denial system, or like the better wall building, or like taking the time to figure out like the squad manager and the getting the better turrets in. Like no one it's one of those things where we wanted to take the time to get those systems in that we've kind of talked about we want to do, like the final turrets, like the pets for the engineer, those kind of things. It's done, it's good. We can just move on at this point, and we can actually start to do more meaningful, like the finite content that we wanted to do, like after we leave early access, because that's the biggest goal, is getting the point where we're out of early access, and it's not like, are they gonna fuck me? Like, are they gonna finish the game? What's going on? You know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, the value proposition's there. I'm having fun. I'm not fighting the game. I'm fighting the infected. If that makes any sense. It's very subjective, because you'll get people that are on the Discord forums that are just the Steam forums are like, everything's fine, it's perfect, blah blah blah, and then you'll get people that are like brothers at the stake. It's 2 extremes. It's finding the middle ground of it, of like, okay, like we do always have things to improve and do. And that's part of just being on, what's the word, what I'm trying to say is like understanding of like both sides, and trying to basically kind of push it in favor of just getting all this situated and done. And as it stands right now, if I look at my docket for the list, let me pull that up. We're working right now to finish up the bugs you guys saw. We got to get the last turret in. We'll get the salmon, but it won't function because the birds won't be implemented until stage 2, going into stage 3. But in the next couple of weeks, we'll get the weather system in, fix the sky, get the unarmored turret in. I'll get the power and the power generation in, and then it's gonna be the fixing some bugs with the preset system. It's some operator bugs with spawning and unpossessing, like you saw when I died. I couldn't properly pop out. Patrol, attack, move, minimap, ping system, ability system. And then at that point, that's everything that's on our dossier to be able to reliably focus some effort on getting a build out to you guys so that you guys can play it. Because once we get that list done, we need at least a couple of days to figure out the Epic backend for a relay service, so you guys don't have to do port forwarding, and you're able to basically like host a session and then join each other. So it's one of those things where it's like we're working towards that goal. I'm just getting it to that point. Anything else you guys want to add? Any questions that have popped up before we start to wrap this up?
Just have a look. So Krieger von Klapper. Last time I played the building, I've built a little bit. Brain short circuiting. I've built many structures that prevent Leviathan from breaching my zone. That causes a crash as a result. Okay, that's not a question. It's a crash. Okay, I need your help downloading the game properly, but I can.
I already answered that question. Yeah, I think he didn't build the starting circuit.
Yeah,
you
okay.
can't do certain things until you build the starting circuit.
I think that is it.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if there's not any other questions, let me see. Michael has his hand raised, but I think he died. I keep inviting him to speak, but he never accepts it. Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway.
Okay, well then, let me see. We'll give it a minute or two for questions to pop in, and then we'll go from there.
So while we wait for questions, I just wanted to add. I sent you an image from. If you want to display it.
Oh, okay. So this is one of the. Hold on. I guess this is one of the Patreon weapons that got designed. I guess he's gonna start doing a lottery every 3 months to basically ask people what weapons they want to add into the game. I guess Michael sent it to. What gun is that? Is that the MK? That's not the 14.
This is a requested gun by. Hang on, let me get the name. So this is a requested gun from a user called Buffalo1137. They requested the HCAR, the high caliber assault rifle. This is done via the Patreon. It is done via the weapon designer pledge on the Cepheus Protocol Patreon. You can pledge to that, approach Michael, request a weapon, and it can be put in the game.
So you figure, yeah. Let's see. Let me switch that back over. Okay, so let me see. Derek, do you want to add anything to the conversation before we pop out? I don't know. I guess I'll invite him to see if he wants to talk. Hello.
Hello. Not too much. You already covered. I was just looking in the audience.
You were sitting in the room. But yeah, Derek's one of the other programmers, so him and I just kind of bang out and just do the stuffs. I don't know. Did you want to just talk about anything you did over the week before we wrap it up?
I mean, sure. What I was working on was a turret. I hopped in only a little bit a while ago because I was working on some emergency bugs that popped up while I was doing the stream. But so I don't remember if you already covered showing the turret. Okay, good. But yeah, the turret was primarily what I've been focusing on throughout this week so far. As it stands right now, it's constructible. I just recently fixed the ability for infected to be able to target it. They had a weird issue with the skeletal mesh there, which is the actual visual parts of the gun that you see. They couldn't actually approach it because they got confused about how to approach it. I fixed that part. I fixed I changed up its health values. I fixed up some other issues. The flashlights weren't actually rotated the wrong way, but I had added a safety to stop a warning. And in stopping that warning, I broke the flashlights attaching to the guns improperly. So near the beginning of the stream, when the lights weren't working properly, that's because they were refusing to attach at all,
Yeah,
rather than attaching but incorrectly, or attaching or attaching and shooting out a warning. So that part's fixed. But yeah, the goal going forward for the turrets now, it's mostly functional as it stands. But right now, the turrets, if they run out of ammo, they run out of ammo, and there's no ammo refill for them yet directly. So the next thing for me there, all the turrets will be getting the ammo refill logic in there for them, like in the previous project setup, where we had the ability to manually purchase ammo for it, as well as the ability to set it to automatically refill and just toll your cash whenever they need a refill.
No, I dig it. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up for that. I don't know, Michael, is there anything you wanted to add, or? I think he's sick. Everyone's like sick this last week. Okay, well.
Yeah, it's been really high pollen in my area, and I have allergies, so it's been some days I've been just taking a longer breaks or getting showers because I've not been feeling well as well.
We will wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate you guys taking the time to come in, drop in your feedback and criticism. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't. If you want to support development, feel free to check out our Patreon, YouTube, the Discord way of pledging. There's also the support packs on Steam. Those all help. They all go towards, basically kind of helping us just kind of focus the project more sometimes from our day jobs. But yeah, we greatly appreciate you guys, and we will see you guys next week.